Our word crabby comes from the fact that they have kind of an attitude.
Today on This American Land, they eat, they dig, and yes, they amuse us. We'll raise a claw to fiddler crabs and their enormous impact on the ecosystem.
Get out of those offices and all the red tape and all the books and just come back, put your feet in the dirt.
One desert lover has a simple plan for lawmakers to learn about and love the wilderness.
Feel it, you can actually feel all the coarse grains of sand that were transported from the beach into the marsh during the storm event.
And find out how this hurricane hunter studies storms without feeling a drop of rain or a gust of wind. All this and more now on This American Land. Funding for This American Land provided by the Weiss Foundation and the Turner Foundation.
Hello, and welcome to This American Land. I'm Caroline Ravel.
And I'm Bruce Burkhart. Today and every episode, we'll introduce you to the people who are working tirelessly to protect our natural resources.
Fiddler crabs are curious little creatures that really shape the health of their ecosystem. Our story now from Sharon Collins at Georgia Public Broadcasting.
There is an amazing community on the coast. It has constant movement, and it's home to some of the most bizarre little characters you'll ever see. We're going to drop down and enter a world most people overlook. These are fiddler crabs, named for the obvious reason that the males have a claw resembling a fiddle. They actually look more like little conductors, leading an orchestra with confidence and passion. Some so carried away with their mission, they fall over backwards. But these funny little fellows are carrying out some very serious business. During mating season, they wave those claws to attract females. Only males have that one large claw, and even though the average fiddler body is an inch wide, the fiddle claw can be up to 2 inches long. Size definitely matters in this ritual. The bigger the claw, the easier it is to see. Their eyes are on stalks, making them look a bit like aliens. But when you're this low to the ground, every ½ inch helps. Females may check out from 3 to 100 males before choosing a mate, and she's looking at more than that claw. You see, each crab has a burrow, the hole they scurry into if there seems to be a threat. Male crabs will build a hood or stack mud balls around one side of their burrow as a type of protection device. When a female starts checking them out, that burrow better be in tip-top shape. Because if she chooses him, they will go into the burrow, he will plug the hole, and that is where she will have her eggs. Watch this fellow try to impress. The lady comes over to check out his mud stacking. He's waving madly. But alas, she doesn't like what she sees and moves on. His mud balls are not in order. Dr. Elizabeth Wenner is a retired research marine scientist who has written more than 80 scientific papers, many of them dealing with crabs.
These organisms are a vital and important part of the ecosystem. They provide food for numerous other organisms besides humans. And they're intensely interesting creatures.
Fiddlers travel together in groups that number into the thousands. Even though they seem to operate as a colony, crabs are very aggressive, and those claws are also used for defending territory or standing ground between a female and an intruder.
The crabs have 10 legs, all that are in this group called the decapods, deca meaning 10, poda meaning the feet. So they
Decapods.
have decapods, and that's the group that they're all in. The lobsters, the crabs, the hermit crabs, they're all in that group, the true crabs.
Fiddler crabs are easy for anyone to see, but you have to be very still and patient. It won't take long before they emerge and start digging. It's non-stop, and sometimes they dig out uninvited guests. Just watch. This guy knows something is in there that shouldn't be.
I see them constantly taking their
Right.
claws and
Yeah.
what are they doing?
They're taking the algae or any other little critters that they may find, and then they are processing it in their mandibles. And then what they do is they roll it up into little balls, and then they discard it. So they're actually rolling it around, sort of like that we do with something in our mouth and tongue, and then they get all the good stuff off it, and then they spit it out.
There are more than 5,000 species of crabs in the world. While many live in freshwater and on land, crabs are found in all of the world's oceans. Crabs do more than feed birds and fish. They also keep the marsh healthy. Most of the grass you see here is called spartina, or cordgrass. As the stems of spartina die, and the tide comes in and washes all of it into a mass of brown sticks, the decaying grass becomes a nutrient for the marsh. It breaks down gradually, so the marsh almost feeds itself. But the crabs also eat away at this decaying spartina and break it down even faster. Some ocean crabs are huge. They can weigh up to 40 pounds. But we discovered a world of little crabs right under our feet. And without them, the entire coastal ecosystem would suffer. I'm Sharon Collins. We'll see you next time.
That claw is how big? What percentage of a male fiddler crab's body is the cheliped, or large claw? 65%.
More than half of all Americans live within 50 miles of the coast, close to land that is especially vulnerable to climate change and rising sea levels. Natalie Pavelski-Rogers takes a look at an island that is facing an uncertain future.
Assateague Island floats in the Atlantic off the eastern shore of Virginia. It hosts a herd of wild horses known as the Chincoteague ponies. It's a world-recognized birding site with 300 species of birds, and it is home to Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge.
We get about 1.4 million visits per year. It's one of the most visited national wildlife refuges in the country. We have an excellent recreational beach, so there's wildlife viewing opportunities, there's hiking opportunities, or photography opportunities. We like to say we've got it all right here.
Lou Hines is the supervisor of Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge. Part of his job is to plan for the future, to make sure the wildlife that lives here continues to have the habitat it needs. By law, that planning has to take climate change into account. So Hines commissioned a report that would show how sea level rise might affect the island over the rest of the century. When the results came in, he says, they were pretty shocking.
Whole parts of this island here and other locations down the eastern shore were just gone. They were underwater by the year 2100. And there's been many generations of Americans that have come here and love this refuge, love this island. And it's going to be life-changing for them and for their generations that follow behind them.
The island shares the same kind of cloudy future faced by coastal areas around the world in the face of a changing climate. Assuming, say, a 1 meter rise in sea levels by the year 2100, a middle-of-the-road projection, scientists will tell you, as ice caps melt and warmer seas expand, low-lying coastlines face major challenges. For Assateague Island, rising sea levels threaten to turn grasslands where the Chincoteague ponies graze into marshes, drown wetlands birds rely on for food, and erase parts of the island completely. The most visited part of the refuge is where the popular swimming beach of Assateague National Seashore is located. It's on an especially narrow part of the island. So the public beach and its facilities, including the parking lots that make it so easily accessible to families on vacation, are especially vulnerable to rising sea levels.
There's about 1,000 cars of parking out there, and we're down to the last square yards that people can actually park on. We could have a severe storm anytime this summer, and all the parking lots could be washed away, and there would be no parking out on the beach.
There are no hotels on Assateague Island, so vacationers stay next door, in the gateway town of Chincoteague Island. For townspeople, talk of beachfront parking spaces disappearing is disturbing. This is, after all, a beach town, and they figure Chincoteague losing easy access to the beach would be like Vegas losing its casinos.
Tourism is our economy. The amount of money that tourism brings in on the eastern shore of Virginia last year was $137 million.
Change is a constant on Assateague Island. For example, at the beach, the spot where a snack bar once stood is now somewhere out under the waves. Scientists say a warming planet will accelerate these changes, making sea level rise at a faster rate, increasing severe storms, and shifting temperature and rainfall patterns.
It's not a pretty picture. We expect that many of these long barrier islands along our coast have a potential to be compressed in their area as the ocean moves them backwards, as well as be broken up over time.
For Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge, the big question is how all those changes will affect habitat, and whether the plants and animals that live here will be able to adapt. For the visitors who enjoy this island and the people who depend on them for a living, change is coming too. And just like the birds, ponies, and other wildlife, they might find their resilience tested.
Legend says Chincoteague ponies descended from horses that survived the shipwreck of a Spanish galleon. But their ancestors were probably colonial-era horses grazed on Assateague Island, so their owners could avoid taxes.
Elegance can be found in many unexpected places, including a nearly 50-year-old government document. A 1964 law defines wilderness as an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. Well, some California residents want part of their state to get this elite title.
It's a unique, world-class ecosystem here. And these plants and animals are especially important because they have evolved, they figured out how do you make a living in this tough, tough climate.
Our people have come from this area since time immemorial. The silence, you can hear it in your ears.
That makes you think about the people who came before. And it also makes you think ahead. This is our responsibility now to protect these places.
One desert, many passions.
We're probably 10 miles east of Mount Whitney right now, across the Owens Valley, the next set of mountains, which is called the Inyo Range.
Just try keeping up with Tom Budlong. At 75, he leaves everyone in his dust on this rugged desert trail.
It's very attractive to some people, very scary to some people.
He knows this region's plants and animals.
This is a juniper, and he's been around longer than a lot of us have. But essentially, as far as the eye can see, a Joshua tree forest. I love them, they're so ugly, they're goofy. I don't know how old those are. He's got to be at least 50 or 60 years old.
And he knows the human remnants along this trail, which was cleared around 1910 to support a nearby silver mine.
So there were a lot of very small entrepreneurs who went into this territory and cut down these trees and burned them to make charcoal. And charcoal is what you use to provide the heat for smelting the silver. And you can still find charcoal camps up here.
On the days he's not hiking, he's fighting.
Yeah, I'm an activist. I go around and bother the people who like to bother the land.
He's helped discourage mining companies from digging here.
We're on our 5th company. 4 companies have come up here and looked and left for one reason or another.
Believe it or not, mining regulations here have not changed since a law signed by Ulysses Grant in 1872.
And that was appropriate in 1872, and it's inappropriate now.
The retired computer expert wants this pristine land protected.
It really hasn't changed in a million years. And that, to me, makes it really beautiful candidate wilderness for designated wilderness.
The bright yellow color, these are the proposed wilderness areas. So these are areas that the California Wilderness Coalition has identified as some of the last wild places in the desert and are proposing them for wilderness protection. We are actually standing right on the edge of the proposed Avawatz Mountains wilderness.
Laura Williams is working to pass the California Desert Protection Act.
And what our proposal looks to do is to preserve this land as wilderness, which is the strongest kind of designation that our public lands can get.
If it becomes law, mining, oil drilling, industrial development of any kind would be prohibited. Camping, hiking, horseback riding, hunting, and fishing would all be allowed.
6.7 million visitors come to the desert region each year, and those folks are spending about $230 million a year in the local community. So a lot of people know about that and want to make sure that those people keep coming back and that they have beautiful places to keep coming back to.
I think it's important that when visitors come to our homeland here in Death Valley National Park, land surrounding it, that they need to be appreciative and respectful of the land.
The determination to protect this land is something Barbara Durham of the Timbisha Shoshone tribe learned from childhood.
Some of these areas have cultural sites that we want to preserve. These lands need to be protected for us, for our future generations.
Durham has worked for the National Park Service and for the tribe. She wants to educate visitors and public officials in Washington.
Yeah, I just wish I could just gather them all up out of this room and just deposit them right here in the middle of our village here in Death Valley, and they'll just be brightened just by the sunlight and just by the fresh air and the solitude and the silence. And, it's getting back to Mother Nature. Get out of those offices and all the red tape and all the books and just come back, put your feet in the dirt.
I was 16, I think, when my parents bought China Ranch, and I was just absolutely astounded by it. So you can see how they really vary widely in color and taste and in texture also. They're very interesting trees and fruit, and the fact that they can survive in this really harsh desert climate is pretty interesting.
Brian Brown's family grows dates, the fruit of the desert. He knows the harsh terrain of the Mojave Desert and its rich history.
This is an old campsite, basically living quarters for early American Indians here who would come to this area. They'd probably camp for a few weeks following the game, and then they would move on. But the cool thing about them is because it's in such an arid, dry climate, they basically walked away and left this here 5,000 years ago, and here it is. I mean, it's a classic, Mojave Desert scenery and panorama with some good cultural stuff on it.
Brown took us on a tour from the date farm to a unique desert river. 25 miles of this river is protected by a wild and scenic designation. The California Desert Protection Act would extend that protection to 4 more miles upstream of where Brian is standing.
We're right on the edge of the hottest, driest place in the Western Hemisphere, and here's this little unknown flowing river, essentially. So as years go by, one of our concerns, and as more development comes to the Mojave Desert, what's going to happen to this little river that's wholly dependent upon groundwater flow?
From 1905 to 1939, the Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad brought talc, lead, silver, borax, and gold through these parts.
If you look over there where I'm pointing, you can see the remnants of the rail bed with the ties sticking out of it. So the trains would pull up there, they would lower the metal ramps down, and then they would shovel the ore off and slide down the ramps into the train.
Decisions being made now will determine what visitors will see here over the next 100 years.
So I think that without legislation, unfortunately, human nature being what it is, these areas will eventually get trashed in some regard, or they'll get carved up and pieced off in the future.
Tom Budlong says being up here is like being dropped into a foreign land where none of the customs or language is familiar.
It can be life transforming because it's so natural and so different. And whether you're religious or not, there's somehow or other something made this, whether it's just plain pure nature or God.
The pinyon tree is a multitasker. It produces pine nuts, historically a staple food for Native Americans, and the pinyon jay, squirrels, bears, and deer. And its wood creates a fragrant, long-burning firewood.
Radar and satellites have helped forecasters dramatically improve their understanding of hurricanes. But there's another tool available that's providing some insight, a sort of time machine of storms past. Miles O'Brien explains in our Science Nation report.
These days we know an awful lot about hurricanes, how they're born, how they grow, where they go, and who should flee. Mostly thanks to technology that keeps our eyes on the sky. But Jeff Donnelly is a hurricane hunter who happens to be a geologist, and so he is looking the other way.
We're able to determine the hurricane activity by basically taking long core samples and looking at deposits that were washed in during hurricane events.
Donnelly is auguring into this Cape Cod marsh to see what happened here in the BM era. That's before meteorologists, way before. Cores like this are nature's archives. You just have to know how to read them, which Donnelly does in his lab at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute.
So this grass is what we were standing on when we took the core. And as we move down, we're basically moving back through time. You get this light layer at around 40 centimeters, and if you feel it, you can actually feel all the coarse grains of sand that were transported from the beach into the marsh during the storm event. And it probably dates somewhere to the early 1800s or late 1700s. And then as we go further back down the core, there's another light layer here, so it's probably 800, 900 years ago. If you feel it, it's also got some sand in it as well, providing evidence of a storm that we knew nothing about before we started doing this work.
But there is more than meets the eye in these core samples. Donnelly uses a sophisticated scanner to determine the precise dates of ancient storms and thus see long-range patterns. Donnelly is also exploring the link between climate change and hurricanes. Does a warmer planet with warmer oceans mean the big storms will get more intense? The jury is still out.
What's going to happen in the next 100 years is still an open question. But it's clear that climate change can modulate hurricane activity. We're clearly influencing climate. How we're influencing hurricane activity still remains to be seen.
And that's getting to the core of the issue. This well-grounded research, way back in time, may help tell us what trouble may be brewing for us in the future. For Science Nation, I'm Miles O'Brien.
Thanks for joining us. Each week we'll bring you thoughtful stories about America's natural resources, its landscapes, waters, and wildlife.
And now here's a quick look at one of the stories we're working on for a future show. It's a homecoming a century in the making. Bison returned to northern Montana, and we'll introduce you to some of the people who struggled to make it happen.
For all of us here at This American Land, we'll see you next time.
For more information about this program, visit thisamericanland.org. Funding for This American Land provided by the Weiss Foundation and the Turner Foundation.